Hey everyone, welcome back to North End Sports, your one-stop shop for everything sports with a Toronto twist. Today we continue on the path of the Stanley Cup playoffs, as we highlight some game action and get a feel for how things are really going to shake out. So sit back, relax, and take a listen to what's going on in this year's Western Conference Finals. So if you watched our Western Conference Final video, the little preview video that we did, I brought up the fact that there's one word that I think is going to really describe this series, and that word was dramatic. If the Stars showed up, and especially if the goalies didn't, this was going to be a super explosive, fun, goofy to watch series. And you know what? That's what Game 1 delivered. It felt more like a game of NHL 22 than an actual Stanley Cup playoff game. Let's take a look at how in Game 2 things definitely calmed down, but the Avalanche found a way to dominate in the midst of that calmness. I had three main storylines going into this game, the first being things needed to settle down. Neither team wanted a repeat of Game 1, and because of that, we needed to see both teams find a way to be sharper defensively. And while we did see that by both teams, things definitely calmed down. There wasn't a big of a barn burner game. Colorado did it much better. Cale Makar was effectively able to keep up with Connor McDavid, no issue. He was able to skate with him, read the plays. He wasn't an issue for him. So he effectively shut down the best player in the world, and if you're the Oilers, that is the worst case scenario that could have happened. Early in the game, towards, I didn't believe it was the end of the first period, the Oilers had a 5-on-3 in a Stanley Cup playoff game with McDavid and Draisaitl and got nothing out of it. And it was at that point, I'm like, yeah, the Avs are probably winning this game. If the Oilers couldn't generate anything there, when that is their absolute wheelhouse to score their goals, they probably aren't feeling it this game. And that showed just how smart the Avalanche were defensively and how ready they came to play this game. And on the other end of the spectrum, the Oilers were anything but defensively ready, to be honest. Even when the Avs weren't scoring, we could take a look at these stats here, courtesy of James Myrtle. And it shows that the Avalanche were dominating the entire game offensively, even when they weren't scoring. And that whole thing really came to life in the second period. The Avs just cracked the code, and they caught Mike Smith in what is essentially the most Mike Smith fashion thing. 3 extremely fast goals, and the Oilers knew they were in trouble. The Avalanche, I honestly think the Avalanche knew that they had the game at that point. They found the Oilers' weak spots. They knew that they weren't covering the front of the net well, and they just went at it. They just continued to dominate and put pucks on Mike Smith, which is all you really need to do. Speaking of goaltending, this bridges perfectly into the next storyline of the game. No Darcy Kuemper. Not only are the Avalanche taking on some of the best offensive talent in the world, they have to do it without their starting goalie. In the Avs, they definitely tightened things up defensively. I'm not trying to take away from that, but at the same time, I can't take away from how well Francouz played. Perfect positioning, a tight rebound control. He was where he needed to be, and he managed to shut out against McDavid, Draisaitl, and Evander Kane. He came prepared, and this bounces back to that Western Conference Final video we did where I talked about the Avalanche as being a deeper team, where even their backup goalie has the ability to shut out the Oilers. And while it is surprising, it's not the craziest thing in the world. We know Pavel's a good goalie. It's just a deeper lineup. Lastly, the Stars needed to show up tonight. One team Stars needed to decide that this was that team's game, and they needed to go out and win it for them. Show how dominant they are and show why they're regarded as the star players. And thanks to this graphic from MoneyPuck.com, it really shows the Avalanche did that. McKinnon was essentially as offensively dangerous tonight as the entire Oilers team combined. What we can expect and what needs to change coming into this Game 3. Looking at Game 3, we see things going to Edmonton for the first time. With last change now in the hands of the Oilers, I can't see them getting shut out again. So if you're the Avs, the key to the next game is pretty simple. Just do what you did tonight. Now, I'll go a little bit more into detail here, and by that I mean, keep matchups as tight as you can, ensure a strong presence in front of the net for Francouz, help him out, because we don't know actually if Darcy Kuemper is even going to be healthy to play in that Game 3. Also, find those explosive moments. When the Oilers are down 1, when they're down 2 even, they are not out. It's essentially almost still a tied game with how McDavid and Draisaitl can get a quick goal for you. So if you're the Avalanche, the key is finding those moments to break things open and get 3 quick goals. And by doing that, that's going to help the Avs take a commanding 3-0 lead in this series if they can just find a way to play like they did last night. If you're the Oilers, 2 things here. First thing being, you can't get shut out again. I know, easier said than done. You can't have the offense of the Edmonton Oilers, especially against a backup goalie, and get shut out. It's just not acceptable. I know the Oilers players aren't going to accept that. They need to find a way to break through. And now they have last change. So use that to your advantage to create the matchups that you want against pairings you want on the Avalanche to help set yourself up to be the most deadly that you can in the offensive zone. Have McDavid out against the fourth line. Find a way to make it happen. You have that ability at home. Also, start Koskinen. I know he's like technically the backup goalie, but Mike Smith has just been playing too much like Mike Smith that you can't risk going down 3-0 to the Avalanche. Take your gamble here. Smith has already lost you 2 games. Go ahead, put Koskinen in net, and he might just be that key for whatever reason. Maybe he's the one who can shut down the Stars of the Avalanche. He could be the one that prevents those 3-goal bursts. Overall, I'm expecting the Oilers to take one of these games at home, but man, the Avalanche are hot right now. With this kind of momentum right now for the Avalanche, it could be a disaster if you're the Oilers to try to shut that down. If the Oilers can't figure out a way to prevent those odd man rushes, especially when they know that goaltending isn't their strong point, it's looking rough for them. I wouldn't have any confidence in them. We quite frankly could see a Western Conference sweep. It's not out of the question. I know it's only 2 games, but this is the Colorado Avalanche. They were the favorites for a reason. And I think that could be the boost that, sends the Avalanche all the way. That, in my mind, that lives up to the hype. That's the Western Conference giants that they were meant to be. Thank you so much for tuning in. These Western Conference finals are making for some great hockey, and at some point here, we're going to explore the Eastern Conference a little bit as well. For now, though, let us know what are the 4 remaining teams you want to see face off in the Stanley Cup final. For me, I want an Avs and Rangers final. I think that would just be so good. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an upload, and remember, sit back, take it easy, and watch some sports. This has been North End Sports.